They really should be documenting their user requirements to start with. What do you want it to do? Rather than quite often I see a senior exec going, oh, I like this one, I bought this one, and so we're using this one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, no, don't do that.
All right, we're live. Thanks for joining another episode of Life Sciences 360. It's your host, Harsh. Today I have on the show Kathy Walsh from Australia. Kathy is the Managing Director and Principal Consultant at Quality Systems Now. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Hart. Lovely to be here with you and talk with you people.
Likewise, yeah. I want to start out by asking you, you've started Quality Systems Now a little over 5 years ago, from what I can tell. Walk me through the transition from your previous roles in the industry and what was your vision starting the company?
Yeah, so I really did fall into it after taking a sabbatical from a previous job, just taking some time off, getting some fresh air, I guess, from what I was doing day to day. And so I fell into it after some time off. And then when I started a contract role, and it kind of just led into building the business from there. I actually hadn't gone out with the intention, okay, I'm going to now start a business. But it did actually happen on the back of starting a contract role. And what I quite quickly then realised was that there was no best-in-class type of consulting company that really focused in on QMS, compliance with QMS, how to write and how to support multiple industries. So I was just primarily in the pharmaceutical industry in the beginning of my career, but then I'm now helping people in pharma, also medical device, medtech, biotech, all the techs, because they do also have to have a QMS and they have to meet compliance requirements. And so many people just find it burdensome to have a QMS, and they don't actually realise it's there and intended to be integrated with your business. And it should be a tick in the box. It's not that tick in the box, yes, I've done my documents. It is actually meant to be integrated within your business and be your day-to-day. This is how we do stuff.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So in your experience working with clients, if you can spot maybe one good or a bad trend that you've seen when it comes to building and designing quality management systems, I'm curious to know if your answer is different to what I see in US because you're in a different geography. So
Yeah. Look, I think most people when they start, if they haven't had pharma experience, they tend to see it as that tick in the box. And so they see it as, okay, I've got a set of procedures, I've written them all, they kind of align to what we do day to day. I'll put them in a folder and they go on a shelf. And it's just like, yeah, no, that's not the intention of it. It's kind of like you're supposed to be using them all the time, guys. And so, it's not supposed to be just parroting back the regulations. It's just like, what is your business? What do you do? How do you do it? And in that, show an auditor or show someone who's reviewing it what you're actually doing. So I think that is a big thing, particularly not so much pharma, but all the others. They do tend to see a QMS as a tick in the box rather than integrating it and making it work for your company.
Okay. And I'm curious to know that when you're working with clients, are you seeing a lot of clients rely on paper quality management systems or electronic? What have you seen?
Yeah, I do tend to see the broad spectrum. So it does depend on the client and where they are at in their company journey. So I see quite a few startups because they're trying to get their accreditation for the first time. So ISO 17025 or early stage medical device 13485. They do usually start with paper, and then they kind of get their head around how the systems work using paper. And then within a couple of years, if they've been successful and they're growing, then they're thinking about, okay, we need to convert from paper to electronic. If you've got someone who you're in that stage where they're going from paper to electronic, I quite often help there as well. So they're doing the transition. And so they're then moving and they're trying to adapt to an EQMS workflow, which is different to the hard copy process that they've had. So they've got to rejig things because the processes their processes are actually changing because they're moving to this, and they don't understand that. They actually think it's just like, oh, well, we just put it all on this system and then it'll run it for us. And it doesn't work that way.
A lot of quality management happens outside the EQMS.
That's inside. Right. That's right. It's not a magic box.
Yeah.
And so I think the people who put in the less amount of planning and have that, it's still a tick in the box mentality. Oh, this thing is going to do it all for us. That they tend to struggle. And until they have that understanding, it's just that this needs to be integrated in what we do. We need to either customize the workflows or change our process to match this, rather than this clunky hybrid that we're trying to live with. So those types of companies do struggle, and particularly the senior leadership, until they understand that this is not a tick in the box. This is intended to be integrated with all their operational aspects and all their business aspects. And I think once they have that understanding, you get much more traction, and they're usually very great clients then to work with to help them. Until you get to that stage, it can be a little bit of backwards, forwards, and they don't make great leaps because of that. They don't have that understanding.
And you mentioned the transition from paper to electronic. So when you're talking to clients or working on projects, what do you have to share for companies? Like, what are some criteria that they should consider when they're looking at an electronic QMS?
Yeah, so many people don't understand that they really should be documenting their user requirements to start with. What do you want it to do? Rather than, quite often, I see a senior exec going, oh, I like this one, I bought this one, and so we're using this one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, no, don't do that. And then you've got the next level of management all just pulling their hair out going, we can't use this. It's not going to suit our needs. So it usually exposes that kind of fracture that's in that top level of the company. Or it could just be that they don't know. And it's just like, well, we know kind of what we do, but we don't know how to formalize it into a user requirement specification or something similar. And then they start talking to vendors. And then, because all the vendors want to sell them their products and say, oh, yeah, we can do that. But actually, no, they can't. And so they don't do enough of that pre-planning and understanding what they really need it for and what they want to get out of it. And if they do that assessment, put it on paper, and then go and assess all the different types of software, then they're going to get a better product to start with. But if they don't do that, they're on the back foot. They're trying to do catch up, and then they're immediately trying to do workarounds for a new system that they're actually buying. And it's just like, guys, can you get your money back and get something else?
Yeah. There's just the QMS systems market is just blowing up so much. I reflect back and think 5 or 10 years ago, there are a lot of systems that are there today. Maybe they were around, but they didn't have that many clients. Not many companies were using them. But today you have a really good 10, 12 systems. They all are pretty good in their own ways. But as you said, which one's the best suitable for the company, not only for the current state, but the future state, right? Like, are you a company that just has one site in Australia, or are you a company that has 75 sites all across the world? You maybe want to consider how a QMS can fit in that model. So when you talked about looking at the vendors, I want to go a little bit into the audit direction. Have you done a lot of software audits for QMS providers, or?
It is kind of an area where I don't try and delve too much, simply because it is blowing up, and it's quite difficult to stay across all the moving parts in that type of area. However, I have done enough to know. Yes, there are some really good people who are really genuine and trying to meet the requirements and trying to meet the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements from FDA, all of those types of things. And then there are others that are not.
So. Do you have any horror stories that you can share where you really wanted to maybe pull your hair or reconsider a different career?
When you start talking to the technical people, Well, it depends at what level. If they are really the technical people at the coalface, quite often they don't understand your question because they are just the technical nerds. And so I try and stay away from them too much unless I have a really detailed question. But that next level up, more the technical manager who kind of understands why I'm asking that question and that I may not have their background, but I still need an answer. When they start being evasive and when they're just saying yes to everything, that's when I usually do find that I need to do a deep dive in that type of area. But saying that it would meet electronic signature requirements and it doesn't. Show me the interface. It's not anything that we can show you. Well, I'm auditing you because so that these people will actually buy your product, but we can't show it to you. It's just like,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Yeah, it's surprising that I've seen this as well doing audits. A lot of the software providers that are providing QMS, or even not even QMS, this applies to any other electronic system in life sciences. You go to their website and they have like this beautiful illustration. They have the word life sciences. They've put case studies. They put name of a big company and how their product, and you have all that, right? That's a face. Your website is up 24/7. People are looking
That's
at
it.
it. And then when you ask them these questions, basic questions like, show me where's the audit trail, like you should really be able to say, oh yeah, here it is, or here's the
Yep.
document. So I've seen this doing audits myself. A lot of these companies that have been around for a while don't really understand. Like they're it's like they're hearing the question the first time.
Yeah.
Wait, why do you want this document? Nobody's ever asked this before.
That's scary.
So yeah, I've seen that happen a lot as well. But as an auditor, you're really in a tough spot because if you can't see the evidence, you can't really write a good report, or you can't make
That's it.
you can't make an assessment if they're complying with their SOPs, because they either don't want to share the evidence or they don't have the
Well, they
evidence.
don't have it. That's right.
Yeah. So one thing that really is an area that I see still a problem as a quality assurance professional, I've reviewed a lot of documentation in my past roles within a biotech and a pharma company, and also as part of audits. And I'm just, every time I look at a technical document, it's just like so hard for me to shift my brain, because I feel like somebody is making me work extra hard
Yeah.
when I don't need to.
It's like a gym workout.
Yeah, it's like somebody's telling me to go on a treadmill and run really hard. But I imagine my brain on a treadmill running that hard.
And mentally, that's what your brain is having to do, is having to do a workout when you have
Right.
to read that type of technical information.
What can they do to not read that? What can they do to make it simple? Because I like simple, I like words. It's just, it can be simple. I've seen other companies do it, but still majority of them use heavy passive voice and, big words that probably they got from a regulation or a guidance. What is
Yeah.
your, I know you create a lot of content on this. You've specialized in these services. So what advice can you offer?
Yeah. Look, that is a problem that we see not only in our industry, but I think in every technical industry. And it stems from, I think, one of the underlying issues is it stems from people are not taught to write. You go to university and you kind of absorb the way the lecturer likes things written. But if anyone would to go and look at a journal article, half the journal articles that you go and look at in any field, gobbledygook, they are really difficult to understand. And so I think part of the problem is it's that whole learning. And so people have learnt to write in this horrible way because they think it's what's expected. Then when you get into a company where they value plain language, they have to relearn that. And so that can be, and it's a slow process. So people, there are some things that people can adjust to straight away. But if they are naturally a poor writer, and I'm going to call those people a poor writer, if they don't do that well, then it is a little bit of time to get them in the right direction. how to fix it. So if they are a company who really wants to specialize or move their documentation, first of all, they need templates which lay out, this is how the document should look. And don't let your writers mess with it too much. There will be some areas that you will, but templates. So if it's a report, we want background, purpose, scope, roles and responsibilities or whatever, and then these are the main types of headings that you should do, and in the back matter, this is what you should do. So immediately you kind of get the same structure in every report that's written. So when people go to read it, it's in the same place. The thing that they're looking for is in the same place. Same with SOPs or instructions or batch records. It's following a tight template. The other thing is teaching people when they're actually writing to think about what they're writing. A lot of people, when they sit down to write, it's almost like this brain dump. And it's just like they just start writing and hope it's going to turn out for the best. So really, they need to plan what they're going to do. And so in this section, I want to say 1, 2, 3, and then plan out their document, even if it's just on a sticky note. Plan it out. And so then people have got an idea of what they're trying to say in each section. And then they can think about what's in their sentence. And it's just like, okay, I'm trying to say this, this, and teaching people, if your sentence goes for more than 2 lines, it's too long, redo it. Teach them how to do bullets and numbered lists and those types of things. And also teach them that they can put information into a table. It doesn't have to just be data in a table. And that makes the information much more accessible. So you can quickly look at a table and find the information that you want. And it really does help the brain because it becomes much more visual. And as soon as you go to that visual element, not this heavy paragraph text, everyone who looks at a big, heavy paragraph page just groans.
Yes.
that's the treadmill.
Yeah.
But if you put that same information in a table, even if it's written the same way, it's much less intimidating to you emotionally.
Yeah.
And it's much more easy to actually read. So some of those things, without even playing with how they write themselves, that can help a lot. And then you have what is active language, what is passive language. It's around the verb. What's a verb? Most people don't know what a verb is. What's a verb? Oh, no, that's a noun, sorry, but that's a verb. Tell them what the verb is and say, okay, let's do some practice. And so particularly like if I'm teaching people to write an instruction of some sort, so a work instruction, a test method, a batch record instruction type thing, put the verb first, and then that makes it really, really active. Okay, all right, so... and then you give them examples. And so then at least they can write an instruction. Most people should be able to write an instruction. Not everyone can write an SOP. That takes a little bit more skill, but everyone should be able to write an instruction. And then there are the people who actually just shouldn't write because they're technically brilliant, but they just can't communicate. And every company has a couple of those. And they're usually in the technical specialty somewhere, either in the lab or production or whatever. And they are brilliant. They are brilliant, brilliant people. But it's a really tough job, one, to even talk to them sensibly and get something out. And then if they write something, it's just like, oh my gosh, I need an interpreter.
It's either you get too much or you get too little. And that's sort of the thing that I've seen is sometimes I'll get a document that doesn't even have complete sentences. It's just like see attached, or like just broken pieces of information. And yes, the information is there, but I can't really put a title or a logo on it and say it's a document. And the other side is there's just too much where you have to kind of break it down. Yeah. And you mentioned about the it's interesting that you mentioned about writing, like breaking down each, like after 2 or 3 lines, just break it down and give some space. I have read that in a couple of copywriting books. I've seen other copywriting experts. I was doing some research on, how to write stuff on social media, because I'm creating a lot of content on LinkedIn. And many people gave that same advice, do not write more than Like if you're writing a
Yes.
fourth line, just go create a separate paragraph. I don't care what you're writing, just force yourself to do that, because in the online writing, whether you're writing on social media or a document on a screen, there's some study there probably done, that says you shouldn't write more than three, and it's not. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've read that in many copywriting books
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much.
What do you think? I have to ask you this because this is really an interesting topic. What do you think artificial intelligence, does it have a role? Do you think somehow it's going to come in to the writing part of documentation that we do in life sciences?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of just starting to emerge and kind of touch the industry. Um, as for writing SOPs, those types of documents, I guess you could start with it. It might be a starting point, but then you would have to finesse it because everything within that business is unique to you. And so I think if the information is like an external and coming into, so the it's pulling the information from a wide international pool, and then bringing it in to your company, then I think that's, it might be a starting document, and then you go in and finesse it. If it's pulling information from within your company to create a process, then that might be more useful because it's already much more unique. It's how you do things, how you say things. But I think it's still going to have a human look at it if it's going to be a good document. That's the proviso. If you're looking for a good document, then it needs someone to look at it, because then it needs the human factor. Does it work logically? Is it actually correct? Is it compliant? Is that language compliant? So that, there are some language changes that you can actually make to documents that would then make an auditor say, "Hang on a minute, what do you really mean by that?" So obviously, you want to minimise that whole ability to get questioned and cited by an auditor. So I think, I guess it will probably have a place, particularly some of these EQMS companies may actually use it to generate their process documents. But then I tend to look at a lot of those anyway, and it's kind of like, well, that might be the right technical information, but it's certainly not the way that I would put it into an SOP so that it was usable for someone. So I think my short answer is yes, it might have some impact, but I think it's going to have a human look at it to really make it a good document.
Right. And then even like you mentioned, because there's two ways to do it. Either you take the information and put it in a third party tool that generates, but then you're sort of taking data that may be confidential, or is probably confidential if it's in a SOP. But if you had a tool that was only restricted to the people of your company, and everybody was putting information, then yes, all the information going in is your company's information. And as I'm thinking this, the question comes to my mind is, all of these artificial intelligence models are basically taking inputs, and as you put inputs, they get trained. So we have to be, if when this happens as an industry, we have to be very careful of what goes in the initial training phase, because if it's the old language and the old
Yes,
habits, then the technology is not going to give us the output, and then we'll just blame the tools to say
that's
it
right.
doesn't work.
It's just a vicious circle. We're still on the
Yeah,
treadmill.
yeah. So another thing that is also something I've seen working with clients and in different project meetings is the interpretation of different regulations. If I'm in a quality or compliance role or in a IT role, I've seen that people in these roles really understand regulations because they've been in those same meetings and discussions, they've gone through it. But you talk to a business stakeholder in clinical research or manufacturing, and they read the regulation and their interpretation is completely different. So any tips you can provide of how to best interpret language in either FDA or EU regulation, or just industry guidance documents as well?
Yeah. Look, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You've got people who are in the industry and they are specialists in the compliance area, and so they understand. Whereas you've got the business people who are much more entrepreneurial and they're business orientated, and they're like the AI bot. They're trying to grab information and they're learning as they go, as they're moving. And so I think, unfortunately, I do see a lot of those type of people in that senior leadership role they are the one who picks the QMS off the shelf, the one that they like, and it's the same type of issue. Is that the senior leadership there is making decisions that they actually shouldn't be, and being prepared to let your quality specialists in whatever area let them actually have a say and actually let them give much more direction. What I usually do when I come across these people as clients is just I have a lot of mentoring and trying to get them up to speed if they will let me. If they won't let me educate them on the quiet, then what usually happens is that there is a compromise, and it's kind of interesting when you look at them looking back several years later. The quality manager that they had has moved on because they're just tired of pulling their hair out. And so again, those types of people are capped in this area because they are just not educated around the regulations, which is unfortunate. They should go to some forums and they should listen to some podcasts.
Right, yeah. I another thing I read in your bio is you're an author. You've written a book on writing procedure. Can you talk a little bit about what your book is? I know it's about writing procedures.
So we have a book. There we go. That's what the cover looks like. It's called Eliminating the Gobbledygook: Secrets to Writing Plain Language Procedures. And this is really aimed at those people who have to write SOPs, work instructions, forms, those types of things within your QMS. And it gives you that whole structure. And it tells you how do I plan my template, how do I plan my SOP, what should go into the headings, what's front matter, what's back matter, and then teaching them to actually use process mapping. So here is our process. Let's do a process map of it, and then take their process map and then use the process map to guide how they write the SOP. And so then the SOP automatically follows the process. You don't have an SOP that wanders all over the place. It follows the process 1, 2, 3. And so immediately you've got structure within your SOP. And then you teach them how do I write? How do I use tables? How do I use bullets? What's active language? What's passive language? What's a verb?
And is that, so you have the book, do you also do like any training programs that sort of has a condensed version of the book that you provide?
Yeah. So I have a training. It's a deep dive. I'm actually rejigging it at the moment to make it even more streamlined. But I do have a training course that follows the book, does the deep dive, and actually trains people on how to do this. I also do a lot of free training, usually via a LinkedIn event. And so periodically it'll come up, what's plain language? How do I write in plain language? How do I use this particular thing for my QMS, that type of thing. So people should watch out and maybe check what's coming up in my events. And also, I do short little courses as well, and I do go into companies and deliver in-house training. So I've just done a whole pile of training for a client. It's actually on defensive writing, which is kind of like the writing that you do in non-conformances and deviations and CAPAs and complaints, that type of thing. So it's plain language, but it's also the defensive aspect. It's just like, how do I not set my company up for a citation in the middle of an audit simply because of the way that you've done your investigation?
Right. That's interesting. Training specifically. So does that also include responding to inspection observations and stuff like that? Or is it just internal deviations, CAPAs and stuff?
It's more the internal and it's two big learnings for people. One, they understand actually what I write here, and auditors going to review it. They are really one of the main audience for this document. So I need to write it so that it's compliant, and I need to write it so that I'm not exposing the company to wider questioning. So that for a lot of people is a big eye opener. It's just like, oh, okay. That's what happens. So,
Yeah.
and you can see the light going on. It's just like, and they're thinking about the last deviation or complaint or something that they've written, and it's kind of like, yeah, guys, you need to really think about that. And then you've got the plain language aspect, because you can do that and write in plain language without getting someone on the mental treadmill to read your work. And so that and how to write an SOP kind of go together. They're different styles. You do write differently for those things, but the concept of plain language and the concept of writing defensively is similar.
Interesting. I'd never heard about any training on this geared on that topic. They use just defensive writing. That's interesting.
There's not a lot.
Yeah. So as a quality professional, I have to ask you this. I think I've asked everyone who's been on this show in a QA role, because this seems to be a topic that everyone's talking about. What is your definition of quality culture?
So I think it's interesting, actually, that the FDA has now started talking about quality management maturity, and they're linking that with quality culture. So that white paper is, I think it's one of the first times that the regulator has actually started talking about a quality culture in terms of compliance. So my definition is probably something like, without sitting down and finessing it, it's senior leaders and staff exhibit a quality management maturity mindset and attitude in what they do, and so it reflects their behaviours in what they do day to day. That's a bit wordy, but I would say something like that. And because you can have the staff can be better at their day to day quality culture than the senior leadership, and vice versa. And so it's that fracture line. You don't want to have that fracture line between the different levels within the organisation. And if senior leadership are on board for quality culture and improving in that manner, then that is the biggest win, because then you can actually really do something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good definition, because most of the times when people hear the word QMS, the initial impression is it's referring to an electronic system, but it's not. That's a subset of the definition. But as you rightly pointed out, it's the habits, the mindset, the day-to-day practices. How do you respond? How do you communicate? How do you write records? How do you review and approve? All of that kind of, comes into under that umbrella. So
yeah.
Any personal or business goals for 2023? What are you chasing?
I'm actually trying to put a little bit more time aside just for me. So health and, getting outside, that type of thing, which I guess we all try and do. But I'm actually now time blocking it in my calendar. So that would be that's the personal aspect. Professionally, in the business, I'm trying to do more of those courses and getting those courses up and ready for people to do. And so looking at maybe a defensive writing course, like a DIY course, and then if people are interested, then we can do like a classroom, couple of sessions. This is how you write defensively type thing. So I'm thinking about that. I'm also thinking about another book, and I am probably also looking at becoming more adept and helping people around that quality culture piece.
Okay. And talking about books, do you have any recommendations, whether it's for writing or any other topics that you can share?
Ooh, let me think. I read so many things.
Yeah, any that comes to mind if you're reading right now or something you just finished reading.
I'm actually looking forward to reading a book called Buy Your Time Back. And so that's about, your time management, particularly as a business person. Other books that I really get a lot, I actually do get a lot out of Russell Brunson's books if you're into the marketing side of things. And so that's always helpful. If people are really looking for something to read, they could read my book.
Yeah, they should definitely read that. But when they're not writing SOPs, or if they're not in a role where they're writing SOPs.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Atomic Habits is another good one.
That's a good one. Yep.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody about that book because it was so hyped up on social media. Anytime I see book that gets that hyped up, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to read that. But yeah, it was a great book. What do you like doing outside of business or consulting work? Because what do you like to do to unwind, de-stress?
Yeah, I ride an adventure motorbike, so I love going into the local forests, and I'm not going a million miles an hour. I actually just putter along and look at the forests.
Yeah,
So you got all these young guys going past me, and I'm just happily, there's the trees, there's a wallaby, there's the, and the views, and so I actually just like to get into nature, and I usually do that on a bike. So I do try and ride at least once a week somewhere like that. And during all our lockdowns and those types of things, I'm fortunate to be very close to a forest, and that was really something that got me through that type of thing. So
that's good to know. So where can people connect with you? Where can they find you after the show?
yeah, I think probably one of the easiest things to do is look me up on LinkedIn. So Kathy Walsh. And I also have a website, the business website. So that's www.qualitysystemsnow, one word, .com.au. And so that takes you to the business portal. And if they are really wanting some help, they can also email me at kathy@qualitysystemsnow.com.au.
Cool. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I was really looking forward to this because most of my network is in US and EU. You being in Australia, it's always nice to talk to people. Now with technology, we have access to just
Absolutely.
press record and talk to anyone we want. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've covered a great number of topics, and some that are quite I get quite passionate about. So yeah, no, it's been lovely talking with you. I've enjoyed it as well.
All right. Thank you so much and wish you all the best with your personal goals, everything with Quality Systems Now, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.